The crystal chandeliers of the Stovall Foundation's annual charity gala dripped light onto the city's elite. But for Amy Ridings, the glare felt interrogating. At 6 months pregnant, the silk of her emerald gown felt tight across her belly, a constant reminder of the precious, vulnerable life she carried. Her husband, William Stovall, stood a few feet away, a king in his domain. He was laughing, his hand resting casually on the arm of his new PR director, Dana Peterson. The gesture was innocent to the room, but to Amy, it was a brand. Dana was sharp, all angles and ambition, in a crimson dress that seemed to bleed into the opulent surroundings. Amy clutched her glass of sparkling water, the condensation cold against her warm skin. She had been trying to get William's attention for 10 minutes, to tell him she was feeling faint, but he was caught in Dana's orbit. As she watched, Dana leaned in and whispered something in his ear. William's smile widened. He didn't even glance her way. The ache in Amy's heart was sharper than the one in her lower back. This had become their new reality. William present in body, but absent in spirit, his focus perpetually snagged by the brilliant, cutting presence of Dana. Deciding she could wait no longer, Amy started toward him, navigating the clusters of tuxedos and gowns. Just as she reached his side, placing a gentle hand on his back, Dana turned her razor-sharp gaze on her. "Amy, darling," Dana purred, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You look maternal, so wonderfully domestic. William was just telling us how you've dedicated yourself completely to nesting. It's sweet." The word sweet was laced with poison. It implied simplicity, a lack of sophistication. It was a verbal pat on the head. Amy felt her cheeks flush. She looked to William, expecting him to defend her, to gently correct Dana's condescending tone. Instead, he just smiled a tight, non-committal smile. He adjusted his tie, his eyes flickering away from hers. His silence was a betrayal far louder than Dana's words. In that moment, he wasn't her husband. He was a spectator at her humiliation. "The baby and I are both doing well. Thank you, Dana," Amy managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Dana's eyes swept down to Amy's swollen abdomen, a flicker of something cold and appraising in her look. "Of course. I'm sure you have your hands full. Planning nurseries, picking out booties. Meanwhile, William and I are about to close the biggest merger of his career. He needs a partner who can keep up, you know." The implication was clear. I am his partner. You are the help. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Amy felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She gripped William's arm, this time with more force. "William, I need to sit down." He finally looked at her, his focus clearing as if seeing her for the first time all evening. But it was irritation, not concern, in his eyes. "Amy, we just got here. I'm networking. I'm not feeling well," she whispered, her plea lost in the din of the string quartet. Dana stepped closer, her perfume cloying and invasive. "Don't be difficult, honey. You wouldn't want to cause a scene and ruin William's big night, would you?" William looked from Dana's perfectly composed face to his wife's pale, strained one. He saw a problem to be managed, not a person to be comforted. He extricated his arm from Amy's grasp with a finality that broke something deep inside her. "Find a chair by the back wall, Amy. I'll check on you in a bit," he said, his tone dismissive. He then turned back to Dana and the circle of investors, leaving Amy standing alone in the center of the swirling, indifferent crowd. She stood there for a long moment, the glittering room blurring around her. He hadn't just failed to defend her. He had actively chosen a side. He had watched his mistress bully his pregnant wife, and had done nothing. As she slowly made her way to an empty chair in the shadows, a single, cold realization settled in her soul. Her marriage was not a partnership. It was a gilded cage, and the door had just been slammed shut. From across the room, she saw a man in a quiet, well-tailored suit watching the exchange with a look of profound disapproval. Their eyes met for a brief second. It was Stephen Butler, CEO of a rival tech firm. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod of empathy before turning away. But in that fleeting moment, Amy felt seen. It was a tiny flicker of light in an overwhelming darkness. The days following the gala were a study in cold silence. William moved through their sprawling, minimalist penthouse, like a ghost, his apologies vague and insincere. "You were being oversensitive, Amy," he'd said once, not even looking up from his phone. "Dana is just direct. It's how business is done." He made it her fault, another layer of gaslighting that left her questioning her own sanity. But the memory of his inaction, of his vacant smile as Dana belittled her, was seared into her mind. Amy tried to reclaim their life. She'd cook his favorite meals, only for him to call and say he was working late. She'd suggest they work on the nursery together, and he'd claim to be too swamped preparing for the merger Dana had so proudly mentioned. The baby, their baby, was becoming a footnote in the story of William's ambition. The unraveling happened on a Tuesday. William was supposedly on a 2-day business trip to Chicago. Amy was sorting through laundry when his tablet, which was synced to his phone, chimed with a new message. It was on the nightstand, face up. She never snooped. Their trust, she had once believed, was implicit. But a gut-wrenching instinct, born of weeks of isolation and suspicion, compelled her to look. The message was from Dana. "Last night was incredible. Can't believe you're already gone. The hotel feels empty without you. Hurry back." XOXO. Amy's breath hitched. She scrolled up. It was a long thread, a secret history of her husband's life. Photos of Dana and William at intimate dinners, not in Chicago, but at a restaurant just 10 blocks from their home. Texts filled with private jokes, flirtatious banter, and logistical planning for their trysts. One message from William stood out, sent just after the gala. "You were amazing tonight. A true power player. I need that energy in my life." The laundry basket slipped from Amy's hands, clean clothes spilling onto the plush grey carpet. The sterile, beautiful home they had built suddenly felt like a crime scene. Every object, the photos on the wall, the expensive art, the king-sized bed, was a lie. She was not his partner. She was his roommate, the caretaker of his heir, a relic from a life he was actively trying to shed. Her first impulse was a tidal wave of rage. She wanted to smash the tablet, to throw his designer suits out the floor-to-ceiling windows, to scream until her lungs burned. But then, a chilling calm washed over her. It was the calm of absolute certainty. The fight wasn't worth having, because the war was already lost. He had made his choice, over and over again, in 1,000 small betrayals that had culminated in this one, undeniable truth. When William returned the next evening, feigning exhaustion from his trip, Amy was waiting for him in the living room. The tablet was on the coffee table between them. She didn't have to say a word. He saw it, and the color drained from his face. "Amy, it's not what you think," he began, the classic, cowardly opening line of the guilty. "Then what is it, William?" she asked, her voice eerily level. "Is it direct, like Dana? Is it just how business is done?" He flinched, recognizing his own pathetic excuses thrown back at him. She understands the pressure I'm under. The merger seems to be going very well, from the looks of your hotel photos," Amy interrupted, the cold fury finally beginning to surface. "Tell me, was betraying your pregnant wife part of the synergy strategy?" William sagged into a chair, his bravado collapsing. happened. I never meant to hurt you. You meant it every time you chose to lie to me, she shot back, standing up. Her body trembled, not from weakness, but from a surge of protective adrenaline. It was for her and for the baby. You meant it at the gala, when you let her humiliate me. You stood there, William. You watched her try to make me feel small and worthless while I was carrying your child. And you chose her. You chose her then. And you're choosing her now. He couldn't meet her gaze. He stared at his hands, a millionaire titan reduced to a petulant child caught in a lie. What do you want, Amy? Money? The apartment? The question was so transactional, so devoid of love or remorse, that it snapped the last thread of hope she might have been clinging to. He wasn't fighting for her. He was negotiating an exit. I want nothing from you, she said, the words tasting like ash. I want nothing that is tainted by you and her. I am leaving. Leaving? Amy, be realistic, he scoffed, a hint of his old arrogance returning. You're pregnant. You have no job, no family in this city. Where would you possibly go? It was a cruel, calculated blow, designed to remind her of her dependence on him. He saw her as trapped, a problem he could solve with a generous settlement. But he underestimated the strength of a woman who had truly lost everything. I will go anywhere that isn't here, she said, her voice shaking but resolute. She walked into their bedroom, the one they had shared, and packed a single bag with essentials. She didn't take the jewelry, the designer clothes, or any of the trappings of her life as Mrs. Stovall. She took only what was hers. As she walked past him toward the front door, he finally stood up, a flicker of panic in his eyes. Amy, wait, let's talk about this. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle, and turned to look at him one last time. You had your chance to talk, William. You had your chance to stand by me. But you were too busy listening to her. And with that, she opened the door and walked out into the hallway, the heavy click of the closing door echoing the final, deafening end of her marriage. The city lights smeared through the rain-streaked windows of the taxi, a chaotic blur that mirrored the storm inside Amy's soul. She had no destination, just a desperate need for distance. William's taunt echoed in her ears. Where would you possibly go? He was right. Her parents were gone, her closest friends were 1,000 miles away, and her savings had been absorbed into their joint accounts, which she now refused to touch. She was pregnant, alone, and effectively homeless. She had the driver take her to a cheap, anonymous hotel near the airport, paying in cash for a single night. The room smelled of stale smoke and disinfectant. Amy sat on the edge of the stiff polyester bedspread and finally allowed herself to break. Sobs racked her body, deep, guttural sounds of grief, not just for her marriage, but for the future she had so carefully envisioned. A home, a family, a loving partner by her side as they welcomed their child. It had all been an illusion. The next morning, huddled over a lukewarm cup of coffee in the hotel lobby, panic began to set in. She had less than $500 to her name. She needed a job, a place to live, insurance for the baby. Desperation was a cold, sharp-edged thing. She opened her laptop, her mind racing. Before William, she had been a promising marketing assistant, bright and capable. But she'd given up her career to support his, a sacrifice she now bitterly regretted. Scrolling through old emails, she found a polite rejection letter from 6 months ago for a senior coordinator position at Butler Innovations. She remembered the interview. The CEO himself, Stefan Butler, had sat in for the final round. He'd been intense, but fair, asking insightful questions that went beyond her resume. He was the same man she'd seen at the gala, the one who had looked at her with empathy, On a wild, desperate whim, she found his email address online. Her fingers trembled as she typed. Subject, following up, Amy Ridings, formerly Stovall. Dear Mr. Butler, you may not remember me, but I interviewed for a senior coordinator position at your company several months ago. My circumstances have changed drastically and unexpectedly. I am writing to you now not just as a prospective employee, but as someone in urgent need of an opportunity. I am a hard worker, a fast learner, and I am deeply motivated to build a new life for myself and my unborn child. I know this is an unconventional request, but if there are any openings at any level, I would be profoundly grateful for a chance. I can start immediately. Sincerely, Amy Ridings. She hit send before she could lose her nerve, her heart pounding. It was a Hail Mary, a shot in the complete dark. She spent the rest of the day in a haze, mechanically searching for apartment listings she couldn't afford and temp jobs that wouldn't cover the cost of a deposit. By evening, with no reply, despair began to creep back in. She was about to close her laptop when a notification popped up. From Stephen Butler. Subject, following up, Amy Ridings, formerly Stovall. Ms. Ridings, I remember you. I also saw you at the Stovall Foundation Gala. Please meet me at my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. We can talk then. Stephen Butler, CEO, Butler Innovations. The message was concise, professional, yet contained a universe of hope. I also saw you at the gala. He knew. He had seen the entire, humiliating exchange. He wasn't just responding to a resume. He was responding to a person he had seen in a moment of profound vulnerability. The next morning, Amy used the last of her cash to buy a simple but professional-looking maternity dress from a discount store. When she walked into the sleek, glass-walled offices of Butler Innovations, she felt a flicker of her old self, the competent woman she'd been before her identity was subsumed by Williams. Stephen Butler's office was large and overlooked the city, but it was surprisingly understated. He stood to greet her, his expression serious but kind. He was taller than she remembered, with thoughtful eyes that held no pity, only respect. Miss Ridings, thank you for coming, he said, gesturing for her to sit. Your email was direct. I appreciate that. Mr. Butler, thank you for seeing me. I know it was inappropriate. It was resourceful, he corrected gently. He sat opposite her, leaning forward slightly. I was impressed by your interview back then. The only reason we didn't hire you was because your then-husband's company was a direct competitor in a new sector we were entering. It would have been a conflict of interest. Amy nodded, a bitter irony. Her marriage had cost her that opportunity too. That conflict no longer exists, Stephen continued, and I find myself in need of a project manager for a new community outreach initiative. It requires organization, empathy, and the ability to build something from the ground up. I believe you possess those qualities. The position is yours if you want it. Amy stared at him, stunned into silence. A job. A real, meaningful job. Tears welled in her eyes, and this time they weren't of sorrow, but of overwhelming gratitude. I don't know what to say. Say you'll start on Monday, he said with a small smile. He then slid a card across the desk. This is the number for a corporate housing agent we use. They can get you into a furnished apartment by this afternoon. The first 3 months' rent will be an advance on your salary. Consider it a signing bonus. He was offering her more than a job. He was offering her a lifeline. He was giving her a safe place to land, a way to start over, a foundation on which to build her new life. He saw her not as a victim or a charity case, but as a capable professional. Why? She finally whispered, the word thick with emotion. Why are you doing this? Stephen Butler leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Because I know what it's like to have to start over. And because nobody deserves to be treated the way you were treated that night." In his quiet, decisive kindness, Amy felt a profound shift. The breaking point had arrived, but it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. She was no longer William Stovall's broken wife. She was Amy Ridings, project manager at Butler Innovations, and soon-to-be mother. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt the unshakable certainty that she was going to be okay. The next 4 months were a blur of focused, determined effort. Amy threw herself into her work at Butler Innovations, her mind finding solace in spreadsheets, project timelines, and strategic planning. The community outreach initiative was hers to shape, and she poured every ounce of her creativity and pent-up energy into it. Her colleagues knew her only as Amy Ridings, the sharp, new project manager who was miraculously unfazed by her advancing pregnancy. They respected her for her work ethic and her calm, collaborative spirit. For the first time in years, she felt her identity was her own, forged by her own merits. Stephen Butler was a constant, steady presence. He was a demanding boss, expecting excellence, but he was also profoundly supportive. He'd stop by her desk not for overbearing check-ins, but for genuine conversations about the project's progress. He listened to her ideas, valued her input, and gave her the autonomy to succeed. Their relationship was entirely professional, yet a deep, unspoken respect grew between them. He never once mentioned the gala or her past. He treated her as the capable executive he had hired, allowing her the dignity of leaving her history behind. The company-leased apartment was a cozy one-bedroom in a quiet, safe neighborhood. It was a world away from the cold, cavernous penthouse she had shared with William, and she loved it for that. She filled it not with expensive art, but with second-hand furniture she lovingly restored, books, and the tiny clothes and toys she bought for her baby. This small space was hers, a sanctuary she had built with her own salary. One rainy afternoon, as she was assembling a crib, her fingers fumbling with the tiny screws, her doorbell rang. It was Stephen, holding 2 large boxes of takeout. "I thought you might not have had time for dinner," he said simply, a hint of a smile on his face. "And I have a confession. I am terrible at building furniture, but I am an excellent instruction reader." Amy laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said, stepping inside. "But my mother always said the world runs on people doing things they don't have to do." For the next 2 hours they worked together, deciphering the cryptic diagrams and assembling the small wooden crib. They talked about work, about the city, about their favorite books. It was easy, comfortable. When the crib finally stood complete, Amy ran her hand over the smooth wood, her eyes misty. "Thank you, Stephen," she said, her voice soft. "For everything." "You're the one doing all the work, Amy," he replied, his gaze warm. "I just held the manual." Meanwhile, William Stovall's world was slowly losing its shine. His merger with Dana's help had gone through, but it was proving to be a logistical nightmare. Dana, as his new COO, was ruthless and efficient in the boardroom. But their personal relationship had curdled. The thrill of the affair had dissolved into the mundane reality of cohabitation. Her ambition, which he had once found so intoxicating, now felt sharp and demanding. The penthouse was silent and sterile, devoid of the warmth Amy had effortlessly infused into it. He'd sometimes find himself standing in the doorway of the empty room that was supposed to be the nursery, an inexplicable hollowness echoing in his chest. He had tried to find Amy, but she had disappeared. She hadn't used their joint accounts, and her lawyer had sent his a curt letter stating that Ms. Ridings would make no financial claims, but wished to have no contact. It infuriated and confused him. He had offered her a generous settlement, a way to be comfortable. He couldn't comprehend that she had chosen hardship over his money. He told himself it was pride, that she'd come back when she realized how hard the world was. But as weeks turned into months, a cold dread began to seep in. He hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost the moral compass of his life, and he was only now beginning to realize how adrift he was. One evening he saw a local news segment online about Butler Innovation's new literacy program for underprivileged children. The camera panned to the project manager leading the event. It was Amy. She was glowing, her belly full and round under a smart blazer. She spoke with confidence and passion, surrounded by smiling children and adoring colleagues. Beside her, nodding in approval, stood Stephen Butler. Seeing her so vibrant, so successful, so completely independent of him, was like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. The narrative he had clung to of the helpless, dependent wife who would have to crawl back to him, shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. She hadn't needed him. She hadn't needed his money or his name. And in that moment, watching her build a new life, a better life, on the ashes of the one he had destroyed, William Stovall felt the first, true, soul-crushing pang of regret. The first contraction came at 3 a.m., a sharp, insistent clenching that pulled Amy from a deep sleep. A wave of both fear and exhilaration washed over her. This was it. After months of rebuilding her life, brick by painful brick, the most important part was about to begin. Her birth plan was simple: get in a cab, go to the hospital, and call her doula. But as the contractions grew stronger, a wave of panic hit her. She was doing this alone. Her hand hovered over her phone. There was no family to call, no husband to wake. On instinct, she scrolled to Stefan's name. It felt unprofessional, an overstep of boundaries. But he was the only person in the city who felt like a friend, her only anchor. She hesitated, then sent a brief text. "The baby is coming. I'm heading to St. Jude's Hospital. Just wanted to let you know I won't be in tomorrow." She didn't expect a reply. It was the middle of the night. But as she was hobbling out the door to meet the taxi she'd called, her phone buzzed. "I'm on my way. Don't go alone." By the time she was checked into the labor and delivery ward, Stefan was there, looking surprisingly calm in a pair of jeans and a casual jacket. He carried a small bag with a water bottle, snacks, and a phone charger. "My sister has 3 kids," he explained with a wry smile. "I've been the designated go-bag runner before. Just tell me what you need me to do. I can be a distraction, a human stress ball, or I can disappear. Your call." Amy, caught in the throes of another contraction, could only manage a grateful nod. Over the next 12 hours, Stefan was a quiet pillar of strength. He didn't intrude, but he was present. He read to her from a magazine during the lulls, held her hand during the most intense pains without being asked, and advocated for her with the nurses when she was too exhausted to speak. He was simply there, a calm presence in the storm of childbirth. At 4:17 p.m., Lily Ridings was born, screaming and beautiful, with a full head of dark hair. As the nurse laid the tiny squirming baby on Amy's chest, the world fell away. All the pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak of the past year dissolved into an overwhelming, all-consuming love for this little person. She was a mother. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she looked at her daughter, her perfect, precious daughter. When she looked up, Stefan was standing by the window, his back to her, giving her and Lily their moment. He turned when he heard her whisper his name, and the genuine happiness in his eyes was unmistakable. "She's beautiful, Amy," he said softly. "Congratulations." "We're beautiful," she corrected, her voice thick with emotion. She had done it. They had done it. Miles away, in a sterile boardroom, William Stovall's world was imploding. The merger, his magnum opus, had been built on a foundation of sand. Dana, in her aggressive push for expansion, had cooked the books, hiding massive liabilities in a shell corporation. An anonymous tip had led to a federal investigation, and now everything was coming to light. The company's stock was in freefall. His board of directors, once his staunchest allies, were now looking at him with daggers in their eyes. Dana sat beside him, her composure finally cracking, her face a mask of pale, panicked fury. She had betrayed him, using his company and his trust as a launch pad for her own reckless ambition. "This is your fault, William," she hissed at him in a rare moment alone. "You were too weak, too distracted. If you had just let me handle everything from the start." But he wasn't listening. He was staring at his phone, at a single, forwarded photo. A former colleague, whose wife had just given birth in the same hospital, had sent it to him with a simple, devastating caption. "Thought you should know." It was a picture of Amy, exhausted but radiant, holding a newborn baby. In the background, Stephen Butler looked on, his expression one of gentle adoration. The image shattered the last of his defenses. While he had been chasing power and lust, blinded by a treacherous ambition that was now ruining him, Amy had been creating life. While his legacy was turning to ash, hers was just beginning. The baby. His baby. A daughter, he later found out. Lily. He had a daughter, and he had missed her birth. He had thrown away the chance to be there, to hold his wife's hand, to be the first person to welcome his child into the world. He had traded it all for Dana's lies and a collapsing empire. The consequences of his actions were no longer an abstract concept. They were here, absolute and crushing. He stumbled out of the boardroom, leaving Dana to face the fallout alone. He walked numbly through the streets, the sounds of the city fading into a dull roar. He had lost his wife, his company, his honor, and now he realized he had lost something infinitely more precious, a family. His rebirth as a father had happened without him, and the life he had so carelessly discarded had been reborn into something beautiful, strong, and completely out of his reach. 2 years passed. Life found a new, beautiful rhythm for Amy. Lily was a bright, bubbly toddler, the undisputed center of her universe. The small apartment was filled with her laughter, her tiny crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, and the sweet, messy chaos of a child's life. Amy was no longer just a project manager. She had been promoted to Director of Community Engagement at Butler Innovations, a role Stephen had created specifically for her, recognizing her talent for connecting with people. Her relationship with Stephen had blossomed slowly, naturally, rooted in the deep soil of mutual respect and shared experience. He had been there for Lily's first steps, her first words, her first fever. He never tried to replace William, but instead carved out his own unique role. Stephen, the man who could always be counted on, the one who brought pizza on tired nights and knew how to make Lily giggle uncontrollably. He loved Amy, and he was falling in love with her daughter. The question of their future together hung in the air, a gentle and unspoken promise. Amy felt safe, cherished, and for the first time, truly happy. It was on a crisp Saturday afternoon, at a local park, that the ghost of her past reappeared. Amy was pushing Lily on the swings, her face turned up to the sun, when a familiar voice sent a chill down her spine. "Amy," she turned. William Stovall stood a few feet away. He was a shadow of the man she had known. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a deep-seated weariness. His expensive suit was slightly rumpled, and there were lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes. He had lost his company in the scandal, paid massive fines, and become a pariah in the business world he once ruled. The consequences had been severe. "William," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. She instinctively moved to stand in front of the swing, shielding Lily from his view. His eyes, however, were locked on the little girl with dark, familiar hair. A look of profound, gut-wrenching pain crossed his face. Is she? "Her name is Lily," Amy said, her tone firm. "What are you doing here?" "I saw you. I've been trying to find the courage to approach you for months," he stammered, taking a hesitant step forward. "Amy, she's beautiful. She has my eyes. She has my strength," Amy corrected, her voice cold. "You lost any right to claim a part of her when you chose to walk away from us." The words hit him like a physical blow. He flinched. "I know. I was a fool, a blind, arrogant fool. There isn't a day, not a single hour, that I don't regret what I did, what I lost." His apology, which she had once craved, now felt hollow. 2 years too late. She had healed herself, built a life not in spite of him, but without him. His regret was his burden to carry, not hers to soothe. Just then, Stefan arrived, carrying 2 ice cream cones. He stopped short when he saw William, his easy smile vanishing. He immediately moved to Amy's side, a silent, protective presence. His gaze on William was not aggressive, but it was unyielding. William's eyes flickered between them, taking in their easy intimacy, the way Stefan's hand rested naturally on the small of Amy's back. He saw it all. The shared life, the unspoken bond, another man being a father to his child. The power dynamic had completely inverted. He was no longer the millionaire titan looking down on his dependent wife. He was a broken man, on the outside, looking in at the happy family that should have been his. "I see," William said, his voice cracking. "You've moved on." "I've built a life," Amy clarified. "A happy one." "You should go, William. You're upsetting my daughter." He looked past her at Lily, who was now staring at him with wide, curious eyes. He opened his mouth as if to say something to her, then closed it, the chasm between them too vast to cross. The regret in his eyes was so potent it was almost tangible. He looked back at Amy, his face a canvas of desperation. Can I see her again? Please, Amy, I'll do anything." "No," she said, the word sharp and final. "You don't get to reappear and disrupt our peace because you're finally feeling sorry for yourself. Goodbye, William." She turned her back on him, took the ice cream from Stefan, and crouched down to give it to Lily, her world shrinking back to the only thing that mattered. William stood there for a long moment, a ghost at the feast of their happiness. Then, defeated, he turned and walked away, the weight of his choices pressing down on him with every single step. The power shift was complete. Amy was no longer the victim. She was the gatekeeper to the life he desperately wanted back, and she had just slammed the door in his face. William did not give up. A week later, a thick envelope arrived at Amy's office from his lawyer. Inside was not a threat, but a proposal. He was offering to sign over a majority of his remaining personal assets, a portfolio worth millions, into a trust for Lily, to be managed solely by Amy. His only condition was a request for structured, supervised visits. Amy threw the letter in the trash. This was his old way of thinking, that money could fix anything, buy anything, even forgiveness. It was an insult to the life she had painstakingly built on her own terms. But William had changed. His desperation was not for power or control, but for a connection he himself had severed. He knew he had to do something more. He had to face her without the shield of his lawyers or his money. He found out from a public notice where Butler Innovations was hosting its next community event, the opening of a new children's library that Amy had championed. He went there not as a donor or a VIP, but as a member of the public. He stood at the back of the crowd, watching as Amy took the stage. She was radiant, speaking with a passion that captivated the entire audience. She thanked her team, the community, and finally, she looked over to the side of the stage. "And finally," she said, her voice softening, "I want to thank Stephen Butler, whose belief in this project was unwavering and whose belief in me changed my life." Stephen, holding a sleeping Lily in his arms, met her gaze with a look of pure love. The crowd applauded, but William heard nothing. The sight of that perfect, self-made family was a physical torment. This was his reckoning. After the ceremony, as Amy was greeting well-wishers, he approached her. Stephen saw him first and moved protectively to her side, but Amy put a hand on his arm, stopping him. She needed to face this herself. "William, I told you to leave us alone," she said, her voice low and steady. "I know, and I will," he said, his voice raw, with an emotion she had never heard from him before. Humility. "But I need you to hear this first. Not from a lawyer. From me." He looked her directly in the eye, and for the first time, she saw no arrogance, no manipulation, only raw, unfiltered pain. "I was wrong," he began, his voice breaking. "I was a coward. I was so terrified of the man I was becoming, a husband, a father, that I clung to the boy I used to be, the one who needed constant validation, the one who measured his worth in deals and conquests. Dana wasn't my great love. She was my great escape. An escape from responsibility, an escape from the kind of profound, terrifying love you offered me, the kind I knew I didn't deserve." He took a ragged breath. "I let her hurt you. I watched it happen, and I did nothing, because standing up for you would have meant admitting my own weakness. It was easier to let you be the victim than to admit I was the villain. And for that, I will never forgive myself." He then did something that shattered Amy's composure. The once invincible William Stovall sank to his knees on the polished library floor, right there in front of her. He didn't care who was watching. "Amy, I am begging you," he whispered, his head bowed. "Not for you. I lost you. I know that. I destroyed any chance of us. This is for her. For Lily. Please don't let my catastrophic failure as a husband make me a complete failure as a father. I don't want the money back. I don't want anything from you. I just want to know my daughter. Let me read her a story. Let me see her on her birthday. I will accept any boundary, any rule you set. I will crawl if I have to. Please, I'm begging you." Tears were streaming down his face, silent and unashamed. This wasn't a performance. It was a complete and utter surrender. The man who had everything was now kneeling, begging for the one thing he couldn't buy. Amy was frozen, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. The anger she had held for so long was being washed away by a confusing wave of pity. This broken man was a stranger to her. She looked at Stephen. He wasn't glaring at William with hatred. His expression was one of quiet solemnity. He gently squeezed her arm. "It's your decision, Amy. Whatever you choose, I'm with you." His unconditional support was the final piece. This wasn't about William's redemption. It wasn't about forgiving him or forgetting the past. This was about her daughter. What was best for Lily? Could a child be harmed by having a father who was genuinely, desperately remorseful and wanted to love her? She looked down at the kneeling man who was once her entire world. The power was entirely in her hands. She had to make a choice, not between two men, but between her past and her daughter's future. Amy took a deep breath, the scent of new books and fresh paint filling her lungs. She was standing in the quiet of the children's library, a monument to the new life she had built. William was still kneeling, waiting for his sentence. "Get up, William," she said, her voice soft but firm. He slowly rose to his feet, his face etched with anxious hope. "I will never forget what you did," she stated, her words clear and precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "The love I had for you is gone. It died the night of that gala, and you spent the next few months burying it. We will never be a family again." His face fell, but he nodded, accepting her terms. "I understand, but," she continued, looking over at Stefan, who was gently rocking a stirring Lily. "Lily deserves to know her father. Not the man you were, but the man you are trying to become. I will agree to co-parent. We will use a mediator to set up a schedule for supervised visits. They will be short at first. You will respect my rules, my boundaries, and Stefan's role in our lives. You will never speak ill of him or me in front of her. You will earn her trust, not demand it. If you ever, for 1 second, revert to the man you were, it's over. Do you understand?" Relief washed over William's face, so profoundly that he seemed to shrink, the tension draining out of him. Tears welled in his eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "Yes," he choked out. "Thank you, Amy, thank you." It was not the reunion he might have dreamed of, but it was more than he deserved. It was a sliver of grace, a chance to be a father. That, he was beginning to understand, was a greater gift than winning back a wife he had never truly valued. A month later, the first visit took place at the same park where he had first seen them. Amy and Stefan sat on a bench, a respectful distance away, while William, coached by a child therapist, sat on the grass with Lily. He didn't try to hug her or force affection. He simply pulled out a picture book and began to read in a quiet, gentle voice. After a few minutes, Lily, who had been watching him warily, crawled a little closer, her eyes fixed on the colorful pages. It was a small, fragile beginning. Amy watched them, a complex mix of emotions swirling inside her. There was a faint echo of pain, a ghost of what might have been, but there was no regret. Her gaze shifted to Stefan, who slid his hand over hers, his touch warm and reassuring. He wasn't watching William, he was watching her, his concern entirely for her well-being. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She turned to him, a true, brilliant smile lighting up her face. "I am," she said, and she meant it. He's a part of her story, but he's not a part of ours. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid, dependable strength of the man who hadn't saved her from a villain, but had empowered her to become her own hero. He hadn't given her a fairy tale. He had given her something far better. A real life, built on respect, partnership, and a love that was quiet, steady, and true. William's redemption arc would be long and solitary. It wouldn't end with him winning his family back, but with him slowly, painstakingly becoming a man worthy of being his daughter's father. His wealth was gone, his status a memory. His new purpose was found not in a boardroom, but in the small, patient moments spent on a park bench, hoping to earn a smile from a little girl with his eyes and her mother's unshakable strength. For Amy, a new dawn had broken long ago. Her future was bright, and it was one she had forged for herself, a testament to the resilience of a woman who had walked through fire and learned to build a home in the light. We hope you were touched by Amy's journey of strength, resilience, and reclaiming her power. She found that the best revenge is not bitterness, but building a life of true happiness and peace. Her story reminds us that even after the deepest betrayals, we have the strength within us to start over and define our own future on our own terms. True love is not about being saved, but about being seen and supported as you save yourself. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more emotional and empowering stories every week. Thank you for watching.